How do I approach problem solving in creativity? Okay, yeah. How do I approach the problem solving creativity? What's the problem solving? Okay, and what's the creativity, and what exactly is this thing? All right, yeah. So basically, is this thing when you kind of like a create something? Okay, when you are doing create something in a creative work. All right, yeah. You always gonna face little bit of problem. All right, yeah. Like basically not in the creativity but every factor, like every aesthetic or every kind of like when you are trying to learn something new, you kind of like a face little bit of problem, and that is most important thing you can, because of that when you face the problem, it's kind of like a something learning. Okay, example is that ki, at the when you are child you are kind of like a riding the bicycle but you fell multiple times. Okay, yeah. Why do you fail? Like, is that because of that ki you don't know how to bike, you don't know how to ride the bike? Okay, yeah. But after you fail multiple times, right now you understand that how do we should supposed to do that, we shouldn't supposed to be fail. And right now you are riding your bicycle with really good way so that you won't be able to fail. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, while you are actually failing multiple time on the ground is because of that you don't know how to ride the bike. Okay, yeah. And basically you don't really stop there. Like if you fell down on the ground and you realize that this is not going to happen, then probably you won't be able to learn how to ride the bicycle. But is that thing you have kind of like a something inside of you that you have to learn something new. And basically is this thing, after you fail you kind of like a something is this like a wake up and started doing this thing. Okay, yeah. So this is how humans are actually learn. Okay, basically is this thing, when we learn something we actually make mistakes at the beginning, and that is most common thing, like most common thing in every factor we gonna face this thing. Okay, yeah. Like basically in the job, in kind of like a learning new skills, or in kind of like understanding one thing to another thing, we make lot of mistakes. Okay, yeah. And sometimes that mistake, like most of people are actually kind of like a thing that it's a kind of like a simply failure, but it's not a failure. It's kind of like a something is this thing that ki you actually learn from that. Like basically make your mistake as a good teacher, and basically it is a good teacher. Like let me tell you one thing, no one teacher could kind of like a teach you that what is exactly the best way for you. No, is your mistake is kind of like a telling you that okay, what is actually best life for you, or best kind of like a thing for you. And that is most essential thing. When you do mistake, it kind of like a something represent that you are a human and you are kind of like a something very common person, and that is not really wrong thing. Like this is the only way that you could learn from it. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, when you try to learn something you always gonna face some sort of problem. All right, yeah. Important thing is that how do we supposed to solve that problem? All right, yeah. At most of the cases is important thing is that ki when you try to learn something, you kind of like a fail multiple times. Okay, when you fail that thing, the only solution that you have is that you have to rise up and you have to do this thing. Okay, yeah. You have to rise up, you have to kind of like a not give up and do your thing. Okay, yeah. Again. When you do this thing again and again and again, you realize that ki, like, you understand that the mistake that you did was kind of like a something lack of the experience that you have. And right now you have that experience, then probably you are not actually doing that kind of like a something mistake. All right, yeah. So the almost like a 90% of the problem is actually solved by the kind of like a something not give up. Okay, yeah, you just have to kind of like a rise up and do your thing. It work almost like 100%, like a like riding the bicycle, doing the drawing, or any kind of like a something work, like anything, like in a cooking or anything. It's a kind of like a something is this thing essential for a growth. Okay, is that you have to do those things. Now let's talk about that 10%. Okay, yeah. What's a 10% of the creative challenges, or kind of like a something problem solving things? All right, yeah. So this kind of like a something 10%, like what is that 10%? Okay, yeah. Some of the problems are really required not only just a experience, not only kind of like a rise up and things like that. Sometimes some of the problem are really worse. Okay, yeah. And in that particular process you have to, you don't really have any kind of like a something rise up and do your thing. It kind of like a something is this thing that you have to figure it out. All right, yeah. I'm going to talk about something really one of the historical things actually happened in the human history. Already, so let's talk about the Apollo 11 mission. Okay, I'm not really sure about which Apollo mission, but the category of Apollo mission. In that Apollo mission, okay, yeah, NASA has a kind of like a something have a task to send humans to the moon. Okay, yeah. Like this actually happened before the 1969, because in the 1969 the humans is actually landed on the moon, but this actually happened before that. It's kind of like a simply testing process. All right, yeah. So in the testing process, NASA sent couple of people on the spaceship, and basically this thing they have to land it on the moon. But unfortunately, because of lot of technical problem, the ship, that ship is will not be able to kind of like something land on the moon. Okay, yeah. And this kind of like something bigger problem. Because of that, if that kind of like a spaceship will not land on the moon, then probably the entire astronaut will gonna die. All right, yeah. And this is kind of like a something very problem. All right, yeah. So basically there are kind of like some technical problem. I don't know, like I know there are a lot of technical problem, but I want to talk about this thing. It's a kind of like some technical problem happen in the spaceship. Okay, yeah. So because of that they won't be able to land on the moon. So how do we supposed to kind of like a something save our astronaut at the home? Because of that if they are not landing on the moon, then probably make sure that those astronauts should supposed to be came home to the earth. Okay, yeah. And basically this kind of like a something problem is not kind of like a something easy, because of that they are actually far away from the earth. Okay, yeah. So it is kind of like a something very different thing over there. So how do we supposed to do that? All right, yeah. So they actually kind of like a thought that what if we use kind of like a moon gravity to kind of like a bend towards our spaceship, so that we could use the gravity as a slingshot to the earth. What do you mean by that? It's like you don't really understand, na? It's a kind of like a something scientific thing. I'm gonna talk about this thing right now. All right, yeah. So basically, is this thing? Every planet has its own gravity. All right, yeah. And that gravity is a kind of like something very essential. Because of that, when you have a gravity, that's why you are actually walking on here and something like that. Okay, that's why whatever the things that you kind of like a something like the like fell on the ground. Okay, yeah, like this actually happened because of the gravity. All right, yeah. It's kind of like something like common on the surface, but when you are kind of like a reach at particular height, then probably the magic thing happened. What's the magic thing? A magic thing means like satellite. Okay, yeah. Like have you kind of like considered that why those satellite are always kind of like something at the orbit, they didn't really fall? Because of that they are kind of like a something falling all the time. What do you mean by falling all the time? Because of that our gravity is kind of like a something attract every object to the surface, but at the particular surface, at the particular period of height. Okay, yeah. But because of our earth is kind of like a something sphere, so that means kind of like a something gravity is a kind of like a something a circular. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, the satellite, the every kind of like artificial satellite, like just talk about that international space station. Okay, yeah. So international space station is not kind of like a something flowing on kind of like our orbit. No, it's kind of like a something falling. Okay, yeah. But when it fall, it kind of like a something have a spear, because our earth is a kind of like a something spear. So basically when it fall, it don't know where it fall. Because of that like basically it fall at the curvature. So basically it kind of like a something curve all the time, and basically it's kind of like a rotate. If you still not understand, um I'm gonna kind of like a do little bit of experiment so that you could understand a little bit better. Okay, yeah. So you have a ball, you have to throw the ball. Okay, yeah. So when you throw the ball is kind of like a vent, like a basically parabolically. What's a parabolically? A parabolically means like that it kind of like a create a shape. Okay, yeah. Like basically when you fall the ball, you throw the ball, you throw the ball at the height. Okay, yeah. But is that key, the ball is not really went to that height, it went to the curve way. Okay, yeah. Basically the ball went to a kind of like a something curve way. Okay, yeah. And at sometimes it fell. Okay, yeah. But actually kind of like it create a kind of like a something distance, and the way that it fall, it kind of like something a curve. Okay, yeah. You probably understand this thing, like when you throw the ball didn't really went to that kind of like a something just straight away. No, it kind of like went a particular curve way. When you have that kind of like a something curve, it's kind of like something that really essential. Okay, because every object is fall like as a curve way. Why? Because of that our earth's surface is kind of like a something sphere. Okay, and when it has a sphere, it kind of like a something impact gravity on multiple position of that particular ball. Okay, yeah. What if we throw the ball at very high speed, so that it kind of like a vent to the such a position where it kind of like a something falling, but because of the earth curvature is kind of like a something sphere, it's because of that ki it don't know where it falls. So basically it kind of like a something falling all the time, and it's a kind of like a something at that it's rotate around the sun, and it kind of like a create the orbit. Okay, yeah, it's very hard to explain this thing in artifact, but is that key if you kind of like a something resonate with the gravity and something like that, how it kind of like a something is this thing, then you really work out, you really understand this thing. Okay, yeah. Then there is also another factor that why if they have that kind of like something velocity, then why those kind of like a something satellite will not go beyond that particular that thing. Okay, yeah, is because of that centrifugal force. What's a centrifugal force? Okay, yeah, you already experienced this thing, but I'm gonna kind of like a do experiment over here. Okay, yeah. So what you do is that key you have kind of like a something a bucket. Okay, yeah, you kind of like fill the bucket with the water. Okay, yeah, and you connect that bucket with the rope. All right, yeah, and what you have to do is that you have to rotate that bucket. When you rotate that bucket, basically the water inside that bucket is kind of like a stay intact in the bucket, if even if you rotate almost like a 360-degree. Why? Because of that the force is actually uh, act towards the water to that to escape the velocity, but it actually connect with the rope so that it kind of like connect the centrifugal. So I don't know, it's a very scientific term, like I'm actually talking about a lot of scientific thing. All right, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key in that particular mission, in that Apollo 11 mission, NASA has a kind of like a something task to bring that astronaut alive at the earth. Okay, yeah. But they don't really have any kind of like a something fuel, they don't really have any kind of like a something is this thing that key they should supposed to be come back to the earth. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing they kind of like a figure it out such a problem that key how do we supposed to use moon gravity to kind of like a do slingshot. What's a slingshot? A kind of like a something a satellite way. Okay, yeah. So basically the little bit fuel that we have, we kind of like a use that fuel to kind of like a create a kind of like a something the gravity pull towards the moon. Okay, yeah, we have actually create such a kind of like something power, and as also the gravity it impact, then probably is this thing when we kind of like use that particular energy and the gravity, so that we kind of like a slingshot towards the earth. Okay, yeah, and we actually escape to the we actually return back to the home. So this kind of like a something is this thing a kind of like a something, I don't know. It's a very like it's a like I don't know how do I supposed to explain this thing in this audio thing. Okay, yeah. Like if I have visual, then I would probably talk about this thing. But is that if you want to know about this thing, then probably they make a movie about this thing. Apollo 11, the Tom Hanks in it. Tom Hanks is a kind of like a somebody actor who actually work on that film, and in that particular film they actually execute that key what kind of like a something problem that they face while doing this particular mission and something like that. It's a really good movie. It's a very old movie, by the way. It's been almost like a 1980 something that. Okay, yeah. But this movie is kind of like a telling the story about that when you have that kind of like a something problem, how do we supposed to solve that problem? Because the in that particular situation you won't be able to kind of like a do the things like a rise up and something like that. No, it's the problem is that they have is kind of like a something very different. Okay, yeah, and it's a kind of like something life and death situation. In that particular situation you have to solve the problem very creatively, very aesthetically, and very kind of like a scientifically as good as possible as it can, because if it not, then probably all the astronauts will gonna die. All right, yeah. So at that particular situation it is really essential that the whatever the way that you choose is kind of like a something as the best way, as kind of like as true from every point of perspective. Okay, yeah. And in that particular thing you have to use a kind of like something minimum resources, or whatever the resources that you have, you could do this thing. Okay, yeah. So this kind of like a something the something really the problem solving thing. Okay, yeah. There are a lot of things that actually happen. Okay, yeah, like basically problem solving thing, there are a lot of like a problem is actually shaped with a very different kind of like something problem shaped with a different kind of like something faces, and you have to figure it out. You have to figure it out that how do we supposed to do that, how do we supposed to figure it out, how do we supposed to, yeah. Because like basically 90% of the chances would be kind of like something rise up and do your thing. Okay, yeah. But 10% of the kind of like something some challenges are really required to understand something like what's wrong and how do we supposed to figure figure it out, how do you supposed to like manage that thing, because it's not gonna happen with the experience, it's gonna happen with the kind of like a something like creativity, it's gonna happen with a kind of like a something like the I don't know. Okay, yeah. It's a lot of thing, by the way. It's a lot of thing. If you still want to, if you didn't really understand what is actually the problem solving this thing, then I'm gonna recommend a particular movie, a Martian. Okay, yeah. Martian is a kind of like a something movie which is actually released in 2090 or maybe 2090 or 2020. I'm not really sure. Okay, I'm the just type the Google, type the Martian. Um, um, Type the Martian and just search about this thing and watch that movie. It's actually available on the Netflix or somewhere. This movie is actually telling the kind of like a something exact kind of like a something like the what kind of like a something problem that you have and how do you supposed to face that thing. In that particular movie, the astronaut is actually stuck at the Mars, and basically how he survived and that Mars, it kind of like a telling the story. And in that particular situation you realize that what kind of like something effort that he did to stay alive and something like that. It's really good, really great. You actually understand what is really the problem solving thing over there. Okay, yeah. Like basically he did grow the plant on the Mars, on the surface of the Mars, okay, with his poop. Okay, yeah. So it's a really good thing. Okay, so I don't know, it's really great movie, by the way. All right, yeah. So this is how I kind of like approach my problem solving creativity. Okay, let me tell you one thing. My problem is not kind of like a something very extraordinary. No, my problem is almost like a below that 90% of the people. So I just have to rise up and keep doing your thing. Okay, yeah. But I didn't really face that kind of like a something like the 10% of the problem that it really required that much effort. But still is that key, like you never knows. Okay, yeah, the problem comes with a lot of shapes and sizes, then you have to figure it out. And yeah, it's important thing is that you just have to figure it out. Okay, yeah, like basically life growth is kind of like a meant to be that you have to figure it out. If you don't really face any problem, then probably you are dying. Okay, yeah. And basically you are facing the problem, that means you are alive. So that is what it is. All right, yeah. All right, this is it. I was supposed to be in here. Thank you.